Hello, everyone. Before we get started with episode 52 of FECast Worlds 2020, just a couple quick plugs. First of all, a huge shout out to our patrons at patreon.com who keep us going. So a big thank you to Preweebin, Cotillion, Work Done Son, Chamomile, Crissier, D-Dub, and Yeast Out for their continued support. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. If you would like to be like these lovely people, you can head on over to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal and consider donating. The other thing is a big shout out to SRFS, our editor, who puts in a ton of work every week in order to get FECast out to everyone. And one final thing, if you're not already a part of the Discord, the Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place to get better at Eternal. Heck, we had 5 of the top 8 players from Worlds are members of the Discord and longtime active contributing members. It's really just the best place to talk with other great Eternal players and learn from them. So link is in the description. I'll see you there. All right, without any further ado, let's get started with episode 52 of FECast Worlds 2020. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FECast, the official podcast of the Friends of Eternal. I am one of your hosts, Sunyveil, and Worlds just happened, and it was a thrilling conclusion to the end of our season, and a couple of the other folks on the cast did really well in that tournament. So welcome back into the show, other co-host Stormblessed with the top 4 performance in Worlds. Congratulations.
Thank you, and welcome to FECast, the only podcast with 4 Worlds competitors on it.
Yes, I suppose so. Hey, we talked about this before Worlds, about how it's really cool how we all qualified. Well, none of us are qualified for next year's Worlds, unfortunately. Anyway, welcome back to the cast and top 4 competitor Collector. Congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
And finally, our final guest is the Boxer, who also top 8'd Worlds. Congratulations to you as well. Thanks,
and happy to see the tradition of having the person who beat me on is still going.
Every time.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is tough company one way or another, right? All right, so we're going to spend most of today talking about Worlds and I guess speculate about what's next for Eternal. There hasn't been an announcement yet, but as is tradition, we're expecting to get an announcement somewhere during this cast. Actually, that's a lie. They made a post today, and it specifically did not have an announcement, and so be it. We're left to speculate. Anyway, let's talk about what happened during the tournament. The winner is Lights Out Ace, longtime community member, content creator. Congratulations so much to Lights Out Ace from Team Rankstar, taking home the trophy with Unitless, beating Nico Abba in the finals, playing Hiru Kira. Of course, the top 8 bracket was all thrown. So we had Unitless, Hiru Kira. The top 4 rounds out with Stormblessed on Vision Value and Collector on Elysian. And then the other 4 top 8 decks were Elysian, Yetis, Unitless, and Hiru Kira. Played by A-Rank 13, Gauge 902, The Boxer, and Tydragon, respectively. I did not do well. There was no excuse for it or hiding from it. I just played really badly. And I'm pretty embarrassed that was on camera and in the biggest tournament of the year. But you know what? I think I've successfully moved on from that. And looking forward to next year's competitive season.
Yeah. So to talk about it, there was 2-day events after this past week. Right, we had a whole week of coverage each day, 1 hour a day, covering about one-ish match, and then we moved into the top 16, and the top 16 started off with a doozy of a match. Just to clarify some rumors that are going on, I would like to confirm that yes, A-Rank and myself are in fact still playing the TJS mirror match. It has in fact never ended. So if for those of you who don't know, there's an amazing clip. If you haven't seen, I assume most of you have, but where BK and Corey enter match 1. And they see that there are 12 units in play on either side, and we both have 9 cards in hand. And oh yeah, it's still the middle of game 1. So it was an incredibly long match versus A-Rank at the first round of the top 16.
like 3 ultimate Dianas when we each tuned in, right?
No, Eric had 4 actually, and then he
Oh,
ended up drawing them back and ultimating them all. I think he ultimated all 4 Dianas twice. I think, well, maybe only 3 Dianas he ultimated twice. Either way, he had some like 80 Dianas, classic. Yeah, that was an absurd game. I was very disappointed though that we didn't see it again, having like multiples of them and have like 6-hour day 2 just on the back of like 4 hours of like mirrors. Would have been degenerate. So how did your guys' top 16 go?
So for my top 16, I started out 2-0 in Expedition, which, went very well using our TJS deck. And then I choked and thrown for a little bit and had to go to match 5 to pick up my last win.
Boxer, how did your top 16 go?
Started out a little rough. Played against Collector. Turns out that's not a very good matchup for me.
Yeah, Boxer versus Collector. Collector is highly in favored in that matchup.
But I turned it around and went 3-0 from there to qualify for top 8.
Yeah, I also lost my round 1, and then I went 3-0, winning 2 matches in Throne, perhaps unexpectedly, because I did bring mostly an Expedition deck to Throne. However, I did get somewhat lucky in that, I faced Xenan in the top 16, and Xenan was just kind of a free matchup for the deck, because the new deck is just really good at crushing Xenan, apparently. And Xenan also just didn't do well. I feel like that's the most easy story, is that Xenan went 2-14 over the whole week. And 2 of those wins and 2 of those losses were, in fact, the mirror. So it was 0 and 13 across the whole worlds. It just did not do very well.
Yeah, let's talk about the metagame, because I think that, the metagame going forward is something that a lot of listeners are going to be interested in, primarily seeing what they should take on each ladder. So as far as Throne goes, the big surprise was the winning deck to me. It was the unitless deck. That was not something that was on my radar while testing, but there was a healthy showing from the classic suspects: Elysian spells from the previous ECQ, Hurukira from, we've had that while. Yetis did reasonably well as well. There was a Xenan deck, but as Stormblessed said, was not great. Any other Throne decks that were a big part of the metagame that I may have missed? Stormblessed brought that crazy control, vision value, that Expedition deck to Throne, which I guess, I think there's a lot of powerful stuff there, but I don't think it's going to be a tier 1 deck. It just has to hit the right spot in the metagame.
Yeah, I'm not. I think the obvious pick for if you want to do good solid ladder deck. I mean, I do think any of the decks in the top 16 are probably fine outside of the Xenan. Sorry, Xenan players. Which I am traditionally one of them, but I've moved on to Elysian because it's like Xenan, but everything costs half as much. So, but yeah, so I do think the Vision deck is actually quite solid, even in Throne. I've heard a couple of people saying it's everywhere that they've been facing mirror matches nonstop, which I think is hilarious because we all know how those go. So that's kind of enjoyable on my end. But yeah, I also don't think Unitless is that good of a matchup on Throne. It was a meta call, and I think it was a good meta call.
Yeah, I was going to ask the Boxer that. So do you think that the unitless deck is a great tier 1 deck for going forward, or was it good against a specific metagame or something like that?
So I don't think it's tier 1. I think it was a good call for this tournament, but I wouldn't play it going forward on ladder or in a more open tournament. It only got on our radar later on because we were testing against it and, writing our notes about how decks were facing against it. And then we eventually realized, wait, what if we looked at this the other way? FJP is kind of beating everything we're trying to make work. It's not my favorite deck to play, and it's not one I think that, I don't think it's tier 1. I think you can make it work on ladder if you want to, but there's better decks to be playing.
Yeah.
So what was the matchup that you were trying to prey upon, or do you think that preys upon in order to succeed in an environment?
We thought there would be a fair amount of Yetis, and we also thought it had decent Elysian and Kira matchups, which we later learned weren't as favored as we thought they were.
I do want to just say, if you want to learn how to get better at certain decks, I think that this top, aside from my match versus Nico Aba, which I guess I'll explain at some point in this cast, I think all the games were played quite excellently by basically everyone. I think that the unitless versus Elysian matchup is quite good for unitless. I think it's actually like heavily favored. It just so happens that one Boxer did stumble game one. I think he mulled into 6 game one, right? And so Collector was able to, squeak out a win. Like it was very close. He made squeak out a win. And then game 2, Collector couldn't get there. And then game 3, like Collector just played that whole match so very well. Like I think if it was like anyone else playing that match, I think Boxer probably would have won that. Like that'd been me, even like A rank, right? I think A rank is probably better than me at Elysian. But anyone else but Collector, it's probable that Boxer would have taken that match home, right? So like if you want to learn how to get better at Eternal, watching these tight games is going to be a great way to get better at Eternal.
That match was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
Obviously, I wish I would have won it, but I greatly enjoyed losing it.
I was on edge the entire time. And the entire time against Ace, too. Like, just they were all so close.
When you killed my Scourge, that just had me shaking.
I mean, I realized I played that turn poorly. I had the Huntress to try to kill it, right? But a second Huntress would mark it and a Permafrost, so I should have just Huntress to try to kill it. If you Defiance, then just got the second Huntress and killed it pre-combat.
And by the this is what happened when Collector was talking in voice call. He was commenting on his plays and mentioned the plays he should have made instead while the match was being played, right after the match, right? He was immediately after talking about plays he could have made, he made some great plays, and he was already talking about plays he could have made that would have been even better. And that's how you improve, right? By thinking about what you could have done and getting even better, even when you made already good plays, is making even better plays.
I convinced the voice chat I lost because of how I was talking, so that was fun.
Sneaky Collector came in saying, "Oh man, I punted game 2 away."
But also, as far as the viewers go, for the Elysian deck, I do think the deck is fine. It's just I think it's a much better tournament deck than it is a ladder deck. It's a deck that benefits a lot from you knowing every single matchup what people have in their decks. Obviously with open deck list, that is a lot easier. So you know what you can play around, what you don't have to play around, when you can go for things and when you can't. And obviously you can do that on ladder to some degree if you know the metagame and know what people are generally running pretty well. But if you haven't played Throne in 3 months, I don't really recommend picking up Elysian as your starting deck.
Yeah, it's a hard deck to play for sure. I also think Kira's a high skill deck, but I think Kira has a higher floor than Elysian in a lot of ways. And Yetis obviously has, pretty high floor and a pretty high ceiling as well. So I think Yetis and Kira are probably the 2 decks that if you just want to pick up a good deck are probably your best bet. But if you want to have a fun deck, I think Elysian is very fun to learn how to get good at though. So
right, Yetis and Kira can pick up a bunch of free wins just because you can just kill them before they can do anything sometimes. Elysian, sometimes you'll get the turn 2 Wump into turn 3 Wump, but it's so rare that it's not worth mentioning.
How'd you guys like the health of the metagame? I felt going into the tournament that there were multiple decks that I would be happy to play. And on top of that, I thought the games were good, really interesting, lots of decision points. Did you feel that way also?
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at what was submitted, right? We had 14 different decks in Throne and 14 different decks in Expedition. Well, there were some oddballs I want to not too hard, but Vaderman, basically in some ways brought a draft deck to Throne, to some extent, a bunch of draft cards Ruinous Burst and no torches was a little bit unusual. But it was actually cool though, because we actually got to see, I think we saw Vaderman win a match with that deck, or at least saw it go off once in a game, which was very exciting that it got to do its thing at least once on camera, no less. So that was exciting. So there were a couple sketchy decks, because the interesting thing is that unlike a regular ECQ, you don't have to get through the top 64, right? You don't have to get through the 18 wins. You can bring whatever you want, and it doesn't have to prove itself, in an open field at first, right? You can just everyone expecting, in a sense, Ixtun Control might have been way worse and might have been unlikely to make top 64, but because they could just skip it to the top 64, it gets a lot better, especially in the hands of competent pilots that Boxer and Lights Out Ace are.
So for my end, I will say that I don't think that a wide variety of decks necessarily facilitates a healthy meta. In this case, though, I do think that the meta was fairly healthy. There was pretty much all the different archetypes minus combo represented, but Eternal tends to nerf combo out of existence because they don't like that play interaction in this game. So I think it worked well.
We did have a couple of combo elements to some extent, right? We had Felt at any cost, which is kind of combo-y, and we had 4 Talirs represented across every deck, but of course that's Xenan, which suffered a lot, but it wasn't no combo, it was just very
I don't think Felt at any cost is a combo.
Oh, you don't?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's like saying Spellcrag is a combo deck, right? I think it's a stretch. So piggybacking on what Collector said, I agree that like sometimes you can have a diverse meta, but the games are bad. I would definitely rather have a meta that doesn't have very many decks, but the games are good. But it's even better when it's a diverse meta and the games tend to be very good, which I thought managed to be the case for this world.
Yeah, this meta was pretty good. I don't always love all throne metas. I like playing mid-range decks, and the kind of the grindy shadow mid-range decks I like playing aren't always viable, but I don't know. I had fun playing the games, preparing for this, which is, not my favorite decks, but also pretty good for throne that can be a bit polarizing sometimes.
Boxer likes grindy shadow mid-range decks. Would these include some sort of card that has Vox in its name? Maybe, sacrificing units left and right?
Yeah.
He is the Voxer.
No one saw that coming. All right, so let's move on to Expedition. I know we're biased, right? The three of us that prepared together, but we thought this Vision Value deck was just the bee's knees. I think it was just fantastic and had good matchups all around. We haven't talked too much about Expedition yet, but we also saw a significant amount of fire decks. We saw a significant amount of sling decks. And that was most of it, right? No real shrine decks, and
we saw one Extodia.
Yeah,
Apple Chips for Extodia. we saw a couple mono shadows, of which I will say that Tuan Bon, while their throne deck left a little bit desired, especially in the form of Copper Hall Elites, their Expedition deck was a really good innovative take on mono shadow, right? Pushing it to the aggro direction, putting a bunch of reach cards in the deck like Fear Trackers and Silverblade Menaces to push through damage. I think like Impending Doom could have been Aramont, would have been a decent call there, right? But also like if you go super late, also at any cost to try to push through damage that way. So I think if you want to take like a mono shadow for a spin in Expedition, I think Tuan Bon's a great place to start rather than putting 4 cards main deck and going from there.
I'm also going to disagree in story about the Impending Doom versus Aramont. Like, everyone's packing Relicate, so, like, Aramont hits once and then gets removed, so...
You know what, that's fair. I forgot about that point of it. You know what, I changed my mind. Collector's right.
Yeah, I love looking at an Aramont that I can't ever get rid of until it becomes a relic, and then they hit you with it. It's just the best feeling ever.
You siege breaker it, and, like, you just laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Expedition meta? I mean, the Vision deck was just so much fun to play, and I think that there are other strategies in that faction combination that might be pretty good. But as a whole, did you think the metagame was good going in? I thought so, but maybe with how good I thought the Vision deck is, I think it needs some recalibrating before I can really come up with a really satisfactory conclusion.
Yeah, so I'm actually interested. Boxer, did Rankstar get the TJS deck and just decide that it wasn't worth playing, or did you guys just not really see it?
So everyone but Noverb discounted Know Thy Enemy when it was spoiled, and he was unable to convince us it was a card worth playing, and so we never tried putting that in TJS, and we tried TJS a little bit without that, and didn't really like it enough. We viewed it too much as like, oh, it's a backbreaker-less backbreaker deck, and we never really got it to what you guys got it to.
Because I think not everyone in Worlds had teams to test with. I think Colocoma and Doc tested together. Obviously, Barbarian Camp, we tested with Suny and Cassandrith. I feel that if the TJS deck had been more widespread, which we tried to keep it off ladder once we decided it was real.
We didn't try very hard.
No, we didn't, but I feel like...
the day before Worlds, I did the night before we had to submit decks, A-Rank was playing it on ladder and was we queued into a Worlds competitor, we gave the Apple Chips, and we were like, should we concede the Apple Chips? And A-Rank's like, I'm just gonna play it out versus Apple Chips. Apple Chips can concede if Apple Chips wants to. Literally, they got to play 3 Worlds competitors with our completely busted Expedition deck, and we just didn't care in the slightest.
I feel like the meta was kind of fine going into it how it was. But if the TJS deck had been more popular, it definitely would not have been, and I think it was strong enough that it could have easily been more popular.
Yeah, I think the TJS deck is certainly, I expect in the Expedition ladder right now, it's clearly the deck to beat. It's just so powerful. it just feels so good. Like you're just doing so many good things with it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get on this. Actually, let's just transition now. Let's talk about the preparation for the tournament. I am part of Friends of Eternal, which is an all open team, but I tested with the Barbarian Camp folks and kept it under wraps leading up to the tournament. So as you probably heard Collector mention earlier, that would be Collector, A-Rank, Stormblessed, myself, and Cassandrith. Although Cassandrith ended up mostly doing his own thing.
Yeah.
Helping us out were GT100, Avion, M Gallop, and Batteries. Well, Batteries like popped in a couple times. Am I missing someone? I feel like I'm missing someone.
I know Frappa popped up a couple of times to help us, but
okay, I must have missed them. So that was our testing group, and so we thought going into the tournament in Expedition, we knew that like Sling was going to be popular because it was really popular and people kept on complaining about it on ladder. But like whenever I was playing the deck against like this Vision Valley deck, I was like, this is miserable feeling. This is not fun. I hate playing this deck. Can I just go back to playing the Vision Valley deck? Or like I was playing it on ladder because we wanted to get more information on it or something. And yeah. I was just like, there's a better deck that we have. Can I stop playing this deck yet?
Yeah, Expedition. I mean, it just felt like Sling kind of, and possibly Vision Valley will do a similar thing now. Sling kind of, at least back then, had sort of a stranglehold in the metagame where you either had to play Sling yourself or you had to account for its existence, right? So like Elysian and Expedition got just a lot worse for two reasons. One is that in Expedition, Elysian was relying on Turn to Siege for premium removal a lot more than the Throne version. So the fact that it's one of its best removal spells got nerfed meant that the deck got severely hampered. And then two, Elysian is so much worse into Sling because it doesn't have a way to kill Sling. It can't get through the face ages, and all its units die to Sling. And so like the fact that Sling was so heavy meant that Elysian was also bad. And it's just like the fact that Sling just warped the metagame to such an extent, depending on if you like Sling or not. Expedition, I think, was a little bit worse of a metagame than Throne ended up being overall. And probably still will be a little bit worse because Sling and Vision will be the sort of two big pillars of the Expedition format, so to speak, going forward.
But I think there's a pretty big difference because like the Sling deck was actually not good if people were prepared for it, whereas I think the Vision deck is going to continue to be good. Like it's a much more resilient strategy.
Well, to segue a little bit, I think that the Rank Stars version of Sling was just better than the 3-faction version of Sling. I think going 2-faction was probably the way to go because you got the extra face ages and you got to play Geminon. So Boxer, tell us about how your Expedition...
let's get to that in a bit.
Sure.
The other thing is that Shrine was like, there were a lot of Shrine cards available, but I thought those decks were just bad. I don't know if you guys played some after I told you that, but like I tried a bunch of different things. When it won, it was spectacular, but it did a lot of not very much and losing. So I was pretty sure that it just wasn't consistent enough to be good.
I still think Shrine decks themselves are okay, but they are a victim of Sling getting popular because everyone's packing a lot more Relicate, and so your Shrines just can't ever do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I love my Shrine decks, right? That was one of the decks that I performed best with at ECQs this season. And I actually didn't try a single Shrine deck for testing because I was just that confident the deck wasn't going to be good because Sling was good and that splash damage meant that Shrine's not as good. Especially because like all the best Shrine cards have been nerfed over time that, it just had a bunch of nerfed cards in it. I know Gallop had the same experience as Suny. He also did a bunch of testing on Shrine. Like when it worked for like 5 games straight, it would just like crush everything. And then suddenly it would just lose to itself and lose to getting relic removal. And like the Vision matchup has to be just completely one-sided.
Yeah, and Gallop tried a bunch of Grandin Drone decks, and when we saw him playing, I was like, yeah, this looks like Modern Affinity and from Magic, except instead of Cranial Platings and Ravagers, you've got a bunch of rallies.
So you've got a bunch of trumpet blasts, I believe the phrase you put it.
Yeah, so I wasn't too hot on the Grandin Drone strategies, although the one deck that I think had potential that we just never had time to flesh out was the Okessa Málaga deck. That did some really busted stuff. Although it did have a fail rate, it is a combo deck. But let me say this, I would have liked more time to try that one out because I think it was interesting, it was powerful, and occasionally it would just run away with games and it could attack from multiple different angles. So I'll put a draft of one of the decks that we were testing along those lines, but it could both cheat out a quick relic weapon, or it could go wide with shrine. Did you guys have more thoughts on Okessa?
No, for viewers, if you try out that Okessa deck, be very careful about fast relic removal for your Shopka's Embrace, because you will draw at end of turn and then discard your entire hand.
Yeah, it's like I think like it was Thursday, I believe. Maybe no,
Yeah,
I think it was
on
Wednesday.
Thursday.
It was Wednesday or Thursday.
It was Thursday. It was like
it was
later
Thursday?
on Thursday.
Yeah, it was like like the day before deck submissions were happening. Suny and Collector, I come into the voice call and they're talking about Okessa, and like the deck seemed like promising, but just not enough time to actually truly tune the deck to a place where it needed to be.
Yeah, and we had a good deck lined up. Like, why roll the dice on something like this? Well, we thought we had,
the best
really
deck in the format.
Well, yeah, I mean, a deck that at the very least was going to be very solid against a lot of different things, right?
And I do think that looking at the 24 decks that were submitted for Expedition, I do think the Vision deck was heads and above the best deck submitted. It's a little bit arrogant of me to say that, but like you just look at them and it just looks so much more tuned than the other decks.
Well, okay, hold on. We're going to have this conversation with Boxer, and I have some things about it to say about that in that regard. But yeah. Okay, let's talk about Throne. We didn't really have any strong conclusions about Throne, right? It was just like play what you're good at, play what you're comfortable with. A rank and Collector went with Elysian. I went with Kira, decks that we are comfortable with, and Stormblessed went with whatever the heck he went with.
I won most of my Throne matches. I'll tell you, I lost only one Throne match with my Vision deck that I played.
Yeah, you did way better than me, but just imagine how much better you would do.
I don't know. I think I could. Okay. So I'll get into this now. So I didn't get like any sleep the night before the top 8 for 2 big reasons. One is that nerves, right? It's the biggest tournament that I've ever been in, right? There's that aspect to it. 2 is also that like I was in a good bit of pain. Like I have a personal thing was acting up a bit. And turns out pain is not really good for sleeping, both for falling asleep and for staying asleep. So that made it difficult to sleep. And then like I was tired, so I didn't see lines. Then I misplayed and punted game 1. And then because I punted and got a little tilted, I was also tired, which made the tilt affect me more. And then I just punted game 2 again because I was really tired. Like after I like crashed like 3 p.m. and like slept for like 4 hours. Like I was really exhausted. I think if I had played a little better, Nico had drawn a little bit worse, whatever. I'm not saying like Nico Alba didn't deserve to win the match, etc. He's a great player. But like if I had won that match, I would have just lost to Lights and Ice just because I would have been too tired and I would have just misplayed a bunch. But obviously, I would have preferred getting top 2, obviously. But yeah, I misplayed and that's on me and learn from it. But also like, one thing we've been saying a lot is like, you got to be well rested. You got to eat some food. You got to be just, calm and prepared, right? And I wasn't well rested. I didn't have enough food in me. And that cost me. So that's something to learn from. So the other deck I was considering bring Elysian. The main reason I did bring Elysian is that, I figured there'd be like 7 people on Elysian, and I wasn't confident in my ability to the mirror, especially because I knew that A rank and Collector on Elysian. I thought that they probably had an edge in the mirror over me. And like Doc, I thought was going to be on Elysian. I was like, well, Doc probably also is going to have an edge in the mirror over me. And Doc was the biggest shocker of the whole tournament, what he brought, and he brought the Xenan. But yeah, so anyways, that's my explanation for what happened in the top 4.
All right, Collector, do you have anything you want to add about our preparation for Worlds?
Not really. We went through a lot of it, so.
All right, so let's turn it over to the Boxer, who we haven't had that many conversations with about the testing process. So tell us about what conclusions you guys came to, and we're going to be interested in some of your conclusions about Sling.
So the first deck we looked into was Monoprimal Elysian. After I top 16'd an ECQ, I don't know how long it was ago, time is meaningless now, it was a list Murder of Crows made that I really liked, and we both enjoyed playing it, and it was pretty good, so we decided to try it out and realized it could never beat Sling. And this was before we even thought there was necessarily a great list of Sling. We just thought it would be popular. Spoiler, it wasn't. We just couldn't justify putting more work into a deck like this that just folds to Sling. It's similar to the problem Throne Elysian can have with relic weapons sometimes. It just cannot deal with relics very well, and Sling just guns down your wumps and your draws, and it's not a fun time for Elysian. So then, after giving up on that, we decided to try 8 Rally, which is just playing cards like Cato, Cheerful Shepherd, Tend the Flock, Edge of Uprising, 4 Rally, 4 Fire Conjuring, just this go wide beatdown deck. And it was doing pretty well. I wasn't the biggest fan, but Ace and GHP liked it, so we kept testing it, and then we ran it into TJS, and this type of deck does not do well against a Roland.
No, it does not.
I discovered that a lot over the weekend, that a lot of decks just fold. I played like Roland, and the decks are just like, oh, I lose.
So we threw that idea away then, and when we'd been testing against FTP Sling, we didn't think that deck was good. Like, we expected it to be popular and good against some decks we'd maybe want to bring but couldn't. But the FTP version is clunky. It has a bad power base. I think most versions on Warcry and Ladder had Guardian of Spring. So after giving up on Rally, we kind of decided to try making a Skycrag Sling deck rather than FTP, and you get access to Geminon when you're Skycrag, and you also get access to 8 Waystones, and they're on a pretty decent amount of the time, which Granite Waystone and Cobalt Waystone are pretty powerful cards. You lose some of the units that can enable Sling, but we weren't really trying to go for a double activation with this deck. I think most of the units just dealt the damage when you played them. You know, just playing the good units and not playing Guardian of Spring. We had Tota Colony in the market, but like overall we had less units that enable Sling than most Sling decks. And one of the later additions to that was Torgov, which sometimes enables Sling, but he's still a good blocker and a powerful threat when he's not enabling Sling.
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier, but I think your Sling deck was Grenarender aside, perhaps, maybe Beseech the Throne aside. Perhaps there are other cards that obviously like Grenarender was a meta call, right? But I think overall your deck was just a lot better than the FTP version, right? Not clunky. You get to play powerful Waystones, so your power base just looks a lot superior. And playing Geminon is a big game, especially versus the Sling Mirror, right? Because it survives a Sling It. And the fact that, you don't need Sling to be that good for it to be good, right? If you get 1 Obliterate off with Sling, it's fine. If you draw like 2 cards with Sling, it's fine. And so I think your build was just a really solid version of the deck.
Yeah, the Beseech I wasn't a big fan of at first, but we realized the deck just wants to hit the 4th power really badly, and we were already playing 4 Petition, and we didn't want to just play more raw power because that might cause the deck to flood out, so we added just 2 Beseech there. The Grenarenders were originally Lightning Strike, and then I think decided we didn't think it would have that many good targets, and Popotito suggested Lightning Storm, and we said, no, there's no way there's that many low-to-the-ground go-wide decks. And I suggested Grenarender because we thought, well, there's Sling, and there's 4 Faction Control, which I think 0 copies showed up at Worlds. We thought there would just be more relics running around, and, it's a 2/2 for 2 to block something from an aggro deck if the worst case scenario comes up and they don't have relics. Grenarender didn't end up being amazing, though.
Well, it seems like you had a really good deck if you were just playing against other Sling decks and Monofire or something. Like, if that was what the metagame was, I think that deck probably would have worked out pretty well.
Yeah, we tested it a grand total of 0 games against Know Thy Enemy TJS.
Yeah, it turns out Know Thy Enemy is a pretty crazy card.
So how did your throne testing?
Throne testing. So at first we just made a list of all the decks we'd want to test against, and then we were like trying to figure out what should we try first. And then Popotito was really high on a Xenan list he had made, so we started with that, and it did pretty well. The list is on Warcry if you're interested. It's kind of a weird list. It's even, but it has a market because there's 4 Defile and 4 Last Chance. So you can like steal the Reanimator deck's Merchant and play Waylay on them and other stuff like that. We also had a bunch of Damara in the list because we thought Talir might be more popular than, well, there was Talir, but it was mostly decks with like 2 copies. Yeah, so this is a bit more aggressive than some even Xenan decks have been in the past. You really can't go that long. I think, yeah, our top end ends with just 3 Nash, which are mostly to deal with units from Hurukira decks. Twin Spitling is a very powerful card, and I think that's part of why we stuck on this deck for so long. It has an effect on the game similar to Grazer. It's card advantage, it's a lot of stats.
But unfortunately, it doesn't have Ambushed and Corrupted tacked on to it for some reason.
Yeah. that would be broken.
Oh, yeah. Was Grazer broken?
Grazer into Kilo?
Yeah.
Grazer into Kilo, because then when you sack Grazer, you can then sack the Grazer Shade to get another Grazer, to get like another Kilo.
Well, no, we didn't try Kilo this time around, but we did try 4-faction, even Xenan Kilo before the Last Chance. So there was some Kiloing Spitlings going on not too long ago on TRS. So we were on the Xenan deck until like literally 2 hours before deck submission, and it was Ace, GHP, and I on voice, and we realized, okay, Xenan is great if people are predictable. We had laid out what we thought each person would be bringing to the tournament, and if we couldn't like nail it down to one deck, it was like a couple, we had a Rank and Collector, we had you on Elysian in our prediction, Suny, we had you on Kira, we had Doc on Elysian, or Kira, which we did not expect Xenan from him. We expected Talir or Reanimator from Kolokoma. I think Twanbon we had on some Justice aggro deck.
Yeah, it was a good call for Twanbon. What'd you predict me on?
Either Elysian or some grindy mid-range deck.
Hey, those were the options I was looking at. I was considering between. Well, okay, I think Vision Valley is way more of a control deck than mid-range, but it is grindy.
Yeah, there's other ones that jump. Bruised by God we had on Xenan.
You probably had Adrius on Yetis and Monofire, because that was a pretty easy call as well.
We had him on either Yetis or Elysian. I think we had Cassandrith on Talir, always face on Yetis. The username gave a lot of it.
I'm really impressed that you were able to guess that many people. I guess people ended up being more predictable than I expected them to be for Throne.
But like at the last minute, we kind of realized, okay, what if people aren't predictable? What if we get this wrong? We don't want to be playing Xenan. Xenan just loses to a lot of bigger decks. It's somewhere between mid-range and aggro if you want to try and classify it as something. You don't want the game to go that long. And so we switched to the only other deck we'd really liked that much in testing. And that wasn't actually most of that, like testing it as, oh, we have this on our radar. It was testing other decks against it. It was FJP unitless. So, there was a lot of, are we really doing this going around? And we realized, yeah, we're going to do this. We think this is the right decision. And we found a list on Warcry, and then we looked at the power base and changed things around a bit and realized we wanted one more Justice source and over a Fire source. And the way to do that was cutting a Crest of Fury and adding a Hulu Vow. So that's where that one of Hulu Vow comes from, because we didn't want to play a Seat. We didn't want to play a Banner. There's no Hulu Silex. And then we were pretty adamant about Petition over Strategize, because this deck just wants to hit power, and with Silexes, Petition is power, but it also cycles in the late game. We had not really that many tech options for Garden. We considered Prodigious Sorcery, but there's just not that many targets. This isn't Spellcraig. You don't have your Static Bolts or Seers. Just the one end of the story for the Garden. We split Vanquish and Just Desserts. We weren't sure which was better. I'm not a huge fan of Just Desserts as a card, but it's also nice to have some answers to Silverblade Menace because we were playing Zero Transpose.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm curious, did Shrine come up on like something that you were testing? I know Notorious really likes his Shrine decks, and that was one thing that like we actually had this conversation about when I was building my Kira market. I'm just going to play a Vision of Austerity in my market and never get it against Shrine decks, because if they're smart and play around it, it doesn't do anything anyway, so I'll just have the threat of it the entire time.
That sounds kind of like, I don't want to sidetrack too much, but do you know the story of, I think it wasn't the first Magic World Championship, but somebody forgot to put in Adhikar Wastes, and they had Sleight of Mind to change their night. Okay, this is an eternal podcast. Basically, somebody played the wrong power base, and they had this card in their sideboard that they couldn't cast, and they left it face up on the table while playing game one. So their opponent would play around it in game two.
Yeah.
Shrine was somewhat on our radar. GHP had some lists he liked. We tried a little bit of this a Stone Scar version with Rat Cage and didn't like that. FTS with Supplier we liked a bit more, but I've never been that big of a fan of Shrine decks. Like, sometimes they work out, but I don't like playing that many non-unit cards in my sacrifice decks, and these decks are playing, these relics that you can kind of flood on. Like, synergy decks, you can't play that much removal or non-synergy pieces. I guess they're synergy pieces, but you need a sufficient amount of units for Shrine to do its thing, and you need Shrine for Forge to do its thing, and there's just a lot of moving pieces, and I wasn't that impressed, and I kind of gave up on it pretty early.
Interesting that we came to the same conclusion independently on quite a few things, actually. So that's pretty cool.
So as far as I'm aware, Boxer, both sides actually had very successful results, right? Like we combined, TBC and Tiras got 5 of the top 8 together, and more of that in the top 16, etc. As far as I'm aware, your testing in TBC were in some ways completely opposite, right? While TBC did do some in-person-to-person testing, for specific matchups like Sling and Yetis, a lot of TBC testing was in fact on ladder. But as far as I'm aware, you guys didn't play a single ladder game in like the past 2 weeks. Is that right?
So we did not play decks we were seriously considering on ladder at all. I think I played a little bit of ladder just to do quests and just to warm up for the day. But yeah, we did not actually like test decks on ladder.
Yeah, we were so lax about that.
So, because my theory was, one is that, because there's so few Worlds competitors, the odds that the information spreads that quickly to them is going to be pretty low, because not everyone's trying to test for a tournament. And then in addition, because I mean, maybe we should have played the prediction game. I thought it was going to be harder to predict than it really ended up being, even in my head. Where I was like, yeah, I think Twanbon's on Combre Aggro, I think Adrius is definitely on Yetis, and I think Gage is on Yetis and Monofire. And if I'd kept going, I probably could have made a similar prediction list than you did. But I was like, because I thought the field was going to be harder to predict than it ended up being, I thought that testing versus a wide variety of decks was going to be better on ladder, because that would reflect the field, which in a sense, both scenarios kind of came true.
Yeah, and I don't recommend trying to really make important decisions based on what you think other people are going to be doing, because like at the end of the day, I think you just want to be using the best functioning deck. Maybe it has a slight edge in the current meta, but I don't know, I want to be prepared against everything, and I want to make sure that my deck is just generally a very good deck.
So yeah, so we sort of had approach testing from 2 different angles, and as you can see, both sides ended up coming to great conclusions and ended up having a fantastic result at Worlds. That's just some insight from the backside of how testing occurred.
Yeah, and I would like to say for the record, my results should not count for any sort of statistical analysis, because I was not playing with a brain. So it didn't matter how much preparation I would have done or what I would have brought. I would have not made it past the round of 24 anyway. Anyway, continuing on. Okay, so that is insight into our respective testing processes. I put up a 10-minute vlog type post of what it was like the day before deck lists were due, and this is on YouTube. It'll be linked in the description, and I think it's pretty interesting to go back and see where we were the day before the tournament. The Boxer, do you have anything like this for TRS? I know someone made a post with a bunch of deck lists, right?
Yeah, Lights Out Ace put a ton of the decks on Warcry, a lot of the almost there lists, and I think there were even a few lists that were from before Worlds that we'd just been hanging on to in case they ended up being good for Worlds. Yeah, we didn't do any recording of like our calls for testing. In hindsight, that would have been a good idea. It's cool that you guys made a video about your testing. We'll probably keep putting out deck lists when we find more. Or not find. That sounds weird. That sounds like we're still like preparing for Worlds.
So before we move on from World discussion to what comes next, I have one final question for everyone before we move on from our discussion of Worlds to what comes next. While all of us are pretty happy with what decks you chose and obviously happy with our results, if you didn't take the deck you brought to each format, what was your backup deck? What was your second call deck?
So I am 100% satisfied with the decks that I took to Worlds. I thought that they were the best decks for me to have a good result. If I was not playing them, I guess I'd be playing like Mono Fire and Expedition because there's no way I was going to touch this. Or actually, the Okessa deck. I would have spent more time on the Okessa deck and figured that one out. And in Throne, I probably would have played Yetis. I was pretty close to playing Yetis, but then I decided it had too big of a weakness to like Lightning Storms and Snowballs.
Collector, what would you have taken?
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with Suny that I like my choices a lot. In Expedition, I probably would have looked into one of the Sling variants. I know that we were testing with Champion of Wisdom in the Genève version. Would have had to figure out if I liked that more than the Skycrag, though.
Boxer?
So I'm very happy with my Throne deck decision. Yeah, I'm really glad I didn't bring Xenan. Part of it was, like, it was doing well, but I just wasn't feeling that deck, and FJP clicked with me. For Expedition, if I'm limited to decks we had found during testing, I'm happy with my choice, but if we had found the Vision Value deck, I would have played that. It's a style of deck I like playing. It's a very good deck from what we've seen.
Yeah.
Stormblessed, what about you?
In Throne, I was Elysian, right? Like I did take a risk taking, a mostly Expedition deck into Throne, even though I got to replace some less good cards like Desert Alchemist with very powerful cards like Valkyrie Enforcer. But it was a bit of a risk taking a mostly unknown deck into the big Throne event. Obviously, I'm happy that it paid off. And then in Expedition, I probably would have ended up on a Sling deck, although it is possible it would have just been like I would have bit the bullet and just taken a Shrine deck and been like, well, I'm just going to play around Relic Removal because I think Shrine can still do cool things. So I think it probably would have been like either Sling or Shrine and then Elysian and Throne.
All right, let's talk about what's coming next. During the broadcast, there was no concrete announcement for the next season, which is something that a lot of us were looking forward to. But we do note that there is going to be a set before the end of the year, or at least they're trying to get it out before the end of the year. Do you guys have speculation on what's going to happen, on if there's going to be a 2021 season or what?
I do think there will be a 2021 season just from them saying, stay tuned for announcements and how Scarlet just talked in the Discord. Whether or not they maintain the same price support or structure throughout the year, remains to be seen. But I do think something will be coming.
Yeah, there has to be something. Like, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but the fate of the next competitive season will be the fate of Eternal. The game needs the competitive scene to thrive.
Yeah, my thing is that the game didn't need a competitive scene to thrive in some respects, but now that basically once the genie has been taken out of the box, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? So like Direwolf has given us this wonderful competitive 2 seasons of Eternal, right? So like they can't stick it back in the bottle, because I guess I don't know the internal metrics, but it seemed like it was doing pretty well before it had a competitive season, but like if there's no competitive season at all, then a lot of the top end players will leave because they've enjoyed the competitiveness of it. They're not giving it anymore, right? Like I enjoyed the game greatly, but now that competitive has happened, it's like I can't like it's a junkie, right? I want my next competitive tournament. So like if I can't get it, I might still like play casually, but like I certainly won't play it. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, I think it's fairly likely that we are going to get a next season, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. don't think that there should be a delay. I think at least like they should have preliminary information or whatnot. But in any case, I do think that's on the horizon.
In the article on congratulations, Lights Out Ace Eternal's second world champion page, final results. I would like to point out that they did put me above Collector. They did bill me. Even though we're both 3 to 4, I did get first billing.
Okay.
I just was in it. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, they could have put out like a logo or something, Eternal 2021 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, what they did, they had a simple message that was like, check back for news regarding the future of Eternal's organized play scene. They just said yes, confirm there will be a 2021 season, but we're trying to iron out the details currently. I think that would have been far better than, check back for news. But,
Yeah. Until then, there actually is Tuesday Night Eternal is starting up again. Check out information from Telecomos for that. Link will be in the description. Stay tuned in the Friends of Eternal Discord. We'll definitely do at everyone's for when we have more information about that. I think there is a schedule out though. So if you're interested in playing in some lower stakes tournaments, there is a prize pool, but it's definitely not Eternal Worlds. And just check out the team announcements because we'll be staying on top of that.
Speaking of the community ones, I really hope that they finish the in-client community tournament function soon, because I know they're still working on it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you've brought that up several times, Collector.
Finish it.
That would literally be a game changer in many ways.
I know you're listening, Chapin.
Yeah. All right, and one thing I just want to point out is we've had a lot of discussion in the Legends of Runeterra section of the Discord. Gerger PM mentioned that they hit Masters and are looking forward to finishing in the top 700 to qualify for their end of season tournament. T Chambers from the Backlash podcast has actually contacted me like, hey, do you want to do any collaborations for Legends of Runeterra? And I actually haven't been that involved myself. I've just been playing some on my lunch breaks, but I don't think it would be too far-fetched out to have like a reasonably large Legends of Runeterra presence in the Discord and or the podcast in the future. I'm excited to see how that plays out. I mean, look, this is still an internal podcast and there's no reason to change it, but for those of you looking to get your card game fix on, that is something to have your eye out for.
Especially considering that, we are waiting for set 10, right? Though there are some still spicy things to do in Bastion Rising, like someone's been tweaking a Zumak Shaman deck, which combines with No Blade to just, give your board like plus 20, plus 0, because it counts each unit in the void as getting a decrease. So, there are still some spicy things to do in Eternal, but if you're getting a little bit of set fatigue,
that is pretty
if you're getting a little bit of set fatigue before set 10, that could be the way to go. Boxer and Collector, what are your thoughts on Runeterra? Have either of you tried it out?
I played it a lot when the first set came out. It was okay. It just always felt kind of flat to me. I didn't do Constructed too much, though. I only did Expeditions. I was mainly waiting till maybe actual tournaments started happening to maybe take a higher look at it, and I just haven't bothered to check back in since. So, yeah,
I have not played any of it at all yet. I'm on a Mac, and it's not available on Mac. I might look into, what I think it's called Boot Camp or something, that lets you run Windows on Mac, and I might try playing the game, but I hadn't had a need to add more to my plate when the Eternal season was still going, but now I might have to look into adding some more games.
The mobile version works pretty well.
Oh yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say, I barely play Eternal on mobile. I've played most of it through the Steam client, but actually most of my Runeterra playing has been on mobile. Anyway, before we go, let's just talk quickly about what's next for each one of us. Maybe in card gaming or maybe in life. What are you looking forward to, Stormblessed?
Well, basically, I'm looking forward to going deep into research, right? Because I'm a grad student, so I'm doing research on evolutionary genetics, and I guess my thing is going to make a bunch of simulations. So I'm going deep into simulation work. So that's what I'm interested in, just looking at a bunch of data and simulating a bunch of other data.
It's pretty cool. Collector, what about you?
Not sure. I'll obviously still be playing Eternal. We'll see where I go from here. I should try to force Team Rank Star and DBC to combine, so that way Ilya has something to complain about even more.
How about you, the Boxer? You're taking a break from school. What's your next big project?
So, yeah, I'm taking a break from school. I just could not stand online classes and took a year off because I want to
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I want to finish my 4 years of college the right way, so I'm going to be going back in the fall. And I also realized during my break, I have enough credits. I don't actually need to do another whole year. I just need to do one more semester in the fall, so that's nice. Right now, I'm starting up some math research into knot theory again. I did it over the summer, and one of the people I was working with wants to continue in a certain direction, and she thinks we could maybe end up writing a paper on something.
All right, that's pretty cool.
And then also I need to start looking into grad school stuff.
Yeah, that's always exciting. And by exciting, I mean scary. I speak from experience.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely second the online classes being not fun. I mean, I'm on the teaching side of it, and
yeah, I'm on the teaching side of it now too.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's really just difficult because like one big thing is like in-person office hours are like a big deal. Like I wouldn't be where I'm today as a grad student if I didn't have in-person office hours. But like just that one simple thing, right? If I didn't have in-person office hours, I wouldn't have met the professor that I ended up doing a bunch of research with an undergrad, and I wouldn't be in the lab I am now as a grad student. So
yeah, I'm just thinking back to like all of my college memories that are awesome, and that could just totally not happen during this situation. Anyway, as for myself, I have a stack of games that I'm trying to get through right now. It's right in front of me. It's a stack of games for Switch. So I'm going to start trying to polish that off. As far as what's going to happen with FECast, I don't know when the next episode is going to happen, but when there is news that you should hear, you'll definitely be hearing about it from us, whether that be a new set, announcements on tournaments, tournament results, or just another everyone is trash, right? Another rant about how to get better at Eternal.
I do have some ideas for some like next level game theory stuff, like partially some like classic like MTG theory, like who's the beatdown. I'd like to do like an episode on that theory because I think that would be very useful for the Eternal community. But yeah, so we'll wait and see.
Yeah, so let's do this again next year, shall we? This whole reunion of Worlds Eternal. What, that was phrased horribly. But let's all compete in Worlds next year and have a chat about it after the tournament. Sound good?
Yep, I'm hoping to be third time in Worlds and get past top 4 the next time.
Okay, well, if you could take top 4 100% now, or just leave it to chance, which one are you taking?
What do you mean leave it to chance? Like
leave it to chance, as in whatever the actual odds are for whatever place you might get.
I'd rather shoot for first, so.
Oh man, you are crazy.
Imagine ever getting better than 4th place in a tournament. I don't think it can possibly be done.
Imagine being so good at Eternal that you would turn down 100% top 4 at Worlds. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for listening to us through this competitive season. We'll be back. What can I say? Have a good one. We'll see you in the friend zone. The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the friend zone. All right, thank you so much for joining.
It still feels really weird to hear you say, see you in the friend zone.
You just have this weird concept about what a friend zone entails.
I think this is more about collecting than it does about Suny.
It might, but...